Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. Today I would like to talk about Skyrim again, and when we think about Skyrim and the Empire, we obviously immediately notice that all the similarities that we have with the Roman Empire. But there are some things that are similar, but there are also things that are not similar and are quite different. So I thought it might be interesting to make a video about this, so let's get to it. The first thing that strikes the eye is the colour, red, like the Romans. But in the case of the Romans, is a stronger red, closer to blood red, whereas in the case of the Empire in Skyrim, it's closer to purple, so it's red but a little bit different. The second thing is the symbol. For the Romans is the eagle, for the Empire in Skyrim would be the dragon. They're different, but we still have two flying creatures, so it would be, I would consider it as a similarity. Moving on to map control. Now in the case of the Romans, at its peak, the Roman Empire stretched all the way from Britannia down to Egyptus and the Middle East. There are a lot of different countries and languages within this whole area, so we can say that the Roman Empire controlled a huge area which was called the known world, creating one of the largest empires ever made. Now, moving on to the Cyrodilic Empire, we know that the Cyrodilic Empire controls Cyrodiil and Skyrim. So, if we compare it to the Roman Empire, we have a lot less civilizations, countries and cultures within this, because we only have basically two. But what really makes the difference is the percentage of world map control, because we have to consider that this is the whole world. So this is probably what it would look like if the Empire of Cyrodiil was in our real world, if we compare the percentage of world map controlled. So basically the red parts that we have in the Empire there would comprehend Europe, half of Africa, Iceland, probably United States, Canada and Mexico, and all the way up to half of Russia and down to India, leaving the Argonian estate as the China and Japan, and the southern part of Africa for the Aldmeri Dominion probably, and maybe Australia, we could fit it there, and then South America for maybe Hammerfeld. So again, the Roman Empire had more countries, but the Cyrodilic Empire was definitely bigger. Now, both empires were organized in ranks. It's interesting though that these ranks, although they use similar names, they are actually different. Now, there are 5 ranks that can be earned by the Dragonborn if he joins the Legion in Skyrim. The progress in these ranks occur at the completion of key battles during the war. Now, these ranks are the Auxiliary or Private, the Questor or Sergeant, the Prefect or Lieutenant, the Tribune or Captain, and the Legate or Commander. Now these terminology is also present in the Roman Empire, but with different meanings. There is also, but before talking about this, I'd like to say that in Skyrim there is also another rank that cannot be earned by the Dragonborn, and that is the rank of the General, which is basically the commanding officer of a small imperial army or even an entire legion who reports directly to the Emperor. So comparing these ranks to the actual Roman ones, we have to say that, for example, the Questor was a government rank in real Roman times. It had nothing to do with the war. The tribunes can be both government or military. The auxiliaries in Roman times were basically foreign soldiers. They were not Roman citizens, they were not part of the legion, and they basically served alongside the legion and bolstered its forces. So traditionally, for example, the cavalry of the legion was mostly auxiliary, whereas in Skyrim an auxiliary is just, as you know, the first rank of the legions. The legate was equivalent to a modern-day general, but for the Cyrodilic legate reports to a general. So this actually makes a completely different rank. It is probably closer to a colonel, the Cyrodilic legate, than to an actual Roman legate. Another similarity between the two empires is the presence of camps. Now, imperial camps in Skyrim are normally located in each of Skyrim's holds, with the exception of Hafingr. Now these serve as outposts for the legion, and basically they are instrumental in the ongoing civil war. They're normally commanded by a legate, who can be found in his tent, and also have an imperial quartermaster working at a forge, who is also a merchant. In these camps we have tents, but no fortification nor walls. For the Romans the situation was quite different. Camps would have been fortified. You would have definitely had a fence or a surrounding wall made of wood, and inside you would have tents. So we have tents in both situations, and you would have had actually a smith for the Romans too, in order to repair, for example, lorica segmentata. So that's similar. And there were merchants going around following the legions. So as far as that is concerned, probably we have some similarities here. But the Roman camp was not a permanent outpost. It would have been something built up only to protect the legion, not to control a specific territory. It was a place where the Romans could have come back in case of retreat, and a safe spot for the night. Let us now compare the two kinds of legionnaires, the weapons, the equipment, and the way they use it. Let us begin with the main weapon, the gladius versus the imperial sword. Now these two swords are similar in a way, and we can see that, because they're both short swords that are mainly made to pierce, to attack. We can see that because in the case of the Roman gladius, the tip of the sword is very straight and very pointy, and it looks exactly like the imperial sword in Skyrim. One thing that I find particularly a bit strange in the sword in Skyrim is the fact that the forte of the sword, the area closer to the hilt, is thinner. So that is a bit of a strange thing, because normally it's the opposite. You need stronger area there to parry, and a thinner area towards the end, because it will be the sharpest part. And in order to be sharper, you basically need to remove part of the metal. Having more metal towards the end makes it a better cutting weapon, not really a piercing weapon. But I do have to say that in the game you mostly cut with it and slash. You can pierce occasionally, but you need to move forward in order to do that. So it is more of a cutting weapon rather than a piercing weapon. Another interesting aspect is that the imperial sword is a fullered blade. It has a fuller in the middle, which is basically that little part of metal that is removed in order to increase to make the sword lighter. We do not see this in the Roman gladius, because this technique is mostly medieval, not really used in ancient times. Now, as far as the metal is concerned, we know that the imperial sword is made of steel. As far as the Roman gladius is concerned, some people do believe that it was a certain kind of steel, although obviously the amount of carbon that we find in Roman steel will be very different from that we find in the Middle Ages. We don't know much about the amount of carbon we have in the imperial Cyrodilic steel, so we cannot compare these two metals. Last but not least, the hilt. Roman gladius normally did not have much protection for the hand, whereas the Cyrodilic sword, it being closer to a medieval sword, does have a proper hilt with quillons, although I don't particularly like the fact that it looks like it's as if it's merged with a blade. So that's a bit strange. In the case of the Romans, it would have been actually different metal, like bronze or bone. As in many games, the different kinds of imperial armor we have in Skyrim are differentiated by weight. In the Roman army, well, you see, lorica segmentata and lorica hamata very similar in weight. There is a little difference, but they are still very similar. I wouldn't consider lorica hamata a light armor, but I'm still comparing it to the Cyrodilic light armor here, because they kind of look similar. In both cases, we have the top shoulder reinforcement that looks very similar. Now, in the example I've chosen, you also actually have rings, so that it does look like a piece of mail. There is also a version which doesn't have rings, but still have these reinforcements in leather. So they look very similar. We can see where they got that one from. But as far as the rest of the armor is concerned, Cyrodilic Imperial one looks like a jacket or a gambeson made of leather, and I have to say that between the two, I would rather wear the Lorica Hamata, the Roman one. I definitely prefer the style there, although the Cyrodilic one does look interesting. Now, moving to the heavy department, the situation gets more complex because the armor does look Roman and it doesn't at the same time. You see, the the Imperial armor, the heavy armor, is somewhat similar to Lorica Segmentata, but the shoulder plates are very different. They don't cover the upper arm, but they do have a better protection for the neck. And I have to say that protection looks rather medieval. But the rest of the armor is similar to the Lorica Segmentata. Now, the example of Lorica Segmentata that we have here is the Corbridge Type A, which is the kind of armor that I have in my collection. And the thing is, though, that although that's the most famous one in the general iconography that the people have in mind when they think of a Roman armor, I think that the Imperial Cyrodilic armor is closer to a Newstead type, because the shoulder is kind of broader. We have different system. We don't have these stripes, as you can see, and we have less bands. Now, between the two, I would really be happy to wear and try on the Imperial Cyrodilic armor. So if one day I manage to get a replica of that, I would be very happy. I don't even think it exists, but I would be very happy to make it, for example, for a cosplay. But still, having tried the Lorica Segmentata, I'm not really sure which one of the two would be more comfortable in use. The Cyrodilic Empire one would kind of gives me more of a feeling of protection for the upper torso, but until I wear it, I can't really say. As far as the looks are concerned, that's a difficult one to say. They both look really, really good, but maybe since I'm really happy with pauldrons, maybe I would go for the Cyrodilic one. Now, the helmets is probably where the situation gets almost ridiculously close. The helmets are very similar, but one of the difference is, so the top part is very similar to an Imperial Gallic. The thing is, though, that we don't have movable cheek parts, so that's different. The Roman ones would have been, in fact, fastened by some leather stripes. You can't really do that for the Imperial Cyrodilic ones. So I think that the Roman one would have ultimately given better protection for the face. And this one here, the one that we have in the game, it's actually quite open. Another difference is the backplate. The backplate of the helmet is broader for the Roman one, giving the same advantage as a sallet would, almost. For the Cyrodilic one instead, it doesn't protect as much of the neck. So I would say that between the two helmets, I would rather prefer the Imperial one. Another thing, though, is that the Legionnaires in Skyrim are more protected, because they have protection for the arms, whereas the normal Roman Legionnaire wouldn't, and they have protection for the legs. They have actual greaves. Most Roman Legionnaires didn't have that, only Centurions did. I have to say that it would be very nice to see both in-game in order to compare them, but unfortunately we can't do that, so we'll have to use our imagination. Or mods, I suppose. Gosh, this one looks fantastic. Alright then, I think that this video is now come to an end. I have discussed quite a few things, but please let me know what you think. Do you prefer the Roman Empire or do you prefer the Cyrodilic Empire? Well, thank you very much for watching as always, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye. Now, I always tell you this, but really, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching all my videos until the end, and I hope to see you again for my next video. Please remember to thumb up and subscribe if you haven't, and also comment below. I always like reading your comments and try to respond as much as possible.